The morning sky over Oregon's Crater Lake shimmered with a crystalline blue, the kind of day that invited adventure. The towering cliffs framed the lake like an untouched jewel, while sunlight danced across the surface, disguising the dangerous depths beneath. Tourists lingered on overlooks, snapping photos, while rangers cautioned them about the sudden changes in weather common in the region. It was on this deceptively peaceful morning that Daniel Harris and his wife Emily carried their canoe down to the water's edge. Daniel, 32, had always loved history. His students back in Portland remembered him as a teacher who made the past feel alive. Outdoors, though, was where he came to breathe. His younger brother, Michael, often teased him that he belonged more in the mountains than in the classroom. Emily, 28, was a nurse whose warmth could soften even the hardest days. Now, 7 months pregnant, she carried herself with quiet determination, unwilling to let her condition keep her from sharing the adventure Daniel cherished. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel asked as he steadied the canoe, his voice gentle but lined with concern. Emily smiled, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "I'm pregnant, Daniel, not fragile glass. The lake is calm today. We'll be fine." He kissed her forehead, reluctant but trusting her spirit. Together they pushed off from the shore, their paddles slicing through the glassy surface. To onlookers, they seemed like the perfect image of love and anticipation, a couple savoring one last adventure before parenthood reshaped their lives. Yet beneath the surface, the lake held secrets. Crater Lake, born from the collapse of an ancient volcano, was notorious for its depth and its volatile weather shifts. Rangers warned visitors not to underestimate it, but warnings often faded against the beauty of its still waters. Hours later, when the afternoon sun began sinking lower, other visitors noticed the canoe was gone. No one had seen the couple return. At first, no alarm sounded. People came and went from the lake all day. But as evening shadows grew and rangers prepared to close the park, Daniel's car still sat in the lot. His backpack, water bottles, and Emily's jacket remained inside. The sinking realization spread quickly. Something was wrong. When the call reached Michael, he refused to believe it. "No, that's not possible," he said sharply into the phone. "They're careful." Daniel wouldn't risk Emily like that. But the voice on the other end was steady. The rangers were already organizing a search. News spread through the small Oregon town near the park. Emily's parents drove through the night, their hearts caught between hope and dread. Neighbors lit porch lights, waiting for any word. By midnight, helicopters scanned the shoreline, beams of light cutting across the black water. Divers prepared at dawn, their equipment echoing against the volcanic cliffs. And yet, no sign of Daniel or Emily surfaced. The lake seemed to have swallowed them whole. The story caught headlines across Oregon. "Expectant couple vanishes at Crater Lake," the papers read, sparking speculation. Some whispered of sudden storms, others of landslides beneath the surface. A few darker voices even wondered if something intentional had occurred. But no matter the theory, one truth remained. Daniel and Emily were gone, leaving behind unanswered questions and shattered hearts. If you're captivated by true stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every week we bring you tales of mystery, resilience, and the search for truth, stories that grip the heart and won't let go. The lake fell silent again after the searchlights faded, but the absence of the couple echoed louder than any sound. Michael stood at the shore, fists clenched, vowing quietly to himself, "I won't stop. Not until I know what happened." The still waters of Crater Lake kept their secret, but the story of Daniel and Emily Harris had only begun. The morning after Daniel and Emily's disappearance, Crater Lake no longer looked serene. Helicopters circled above, their blades thundering through the crisp mountain air. Boats glided across the surface, crews leaning over the edges, eyes scanning for any trace of the missing couple. Park rangers coordinated with local sheriff deputies, while volunteers gathered along the trails, ready to comb through the dense pine forests that bordered the lake. Michael Harris arrived just before dawn, his face pale, his jaw set with grim determination. He had driven through the night, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles ached. When he saw the search teams assembled, a flicker of hope sparked within him. "Where are they?" he demanded, striding toward a ranger. The ranger's expression was careful, sympathetic. "Sir, we're doing everything we can. We've got divers going in as soon as the sun's higher." "Visibility isn't good right now." Michael shook his head violently. "You don't understand. My brother wouldn't just vanish. He's smart. He knows these waters. And Emily, she's 7 months pregnant. He'd never put her in danger." The ranger lowered his voice. "We're aware, sir, but Crater Lake is unpredictable. Sudden winds, steep underwater cliffs. Even the strongest swimmer can't fight this place if something goes wrong." Michael turned away, pacing along the rocky shoreline. He stared at the lake, its blue surface calm, almost mocking, as if nothing at all had happened. His chest tightened. Every ripple felt like a secret withheld. Emily's parents soon joined him, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Her mother clutched a scarf Emily had left in the car, holding it against her cheek as though it could bring her daughter back. "Please," she whispered to anyone who would listen. "Find them, just bring them back." Days passed in a blur of frantic effort. Search parties hiked every trail, marking paths with bright tape. Dogs sniffed along the shoreline, though the volcanic rock made the task nearly impossible. Divers descended again and again, surfacing with grim shakes of the head. Helicopters hovered until fuel ran low, returning to base only to relaunch. The town near the park became a hub of activity. Reporters arrived, cameras flashing, eager to capture the human tragedy unfolding. Headlines spread beyond Oregon: "Pregnant woman and husband missing at Crater Lake." Speculation ran wild. Some insisted it had to be a sudden storm, others whispered darker theories. Michael avoided the cameras, refusing to let strangers turn his brother's life into spectacle. But at night, when he finally closed his eyes, images tormented him. Daniel's canoe tipping, Emily's hands reaching for help, silence swallowing them whole. He would wake in a sweat, gasping, then force himself back into the search. One evening, a sheriff approached him with a weary look. "We'll keep searching, but you should prepare yourself. The lake doesn't always give people back." Michael's voice cracked, but his eyes blazed. "No, don't you dare tell me to accept that. Until I see proof, I won't stop looking. My brother and Emily, they're out there, and I'm not walking away." The sheriff exhaled slowly, recognizing the fire in him. "Then let's keep going. But know this, it may take more than we can give." Each day the chances of survival grew slimmer, yet Michael refused to surrender hope. He walked the shoreline alone at dusk, the setting sun staining the water red. In the quiet, he whispered to his brother as if Daniel could hear him beneath the waves. "I'll find you," he murmured, fists clenched at his sides. "I swear I'll find you." The lake gave no answer. It remained vast, silent, and unfathomable, its depths concealing whatever truth lay within. The search pressed on, but desperation began to sink into every heart involved. As the search stretched into its second week, the mood around Crater Lake shifted from urgent determination to a heavy, unspoken dread. Volunteers who had once combed the trails with eager energy now moved more slowly, weighed down by fatigue and the creeping suspicion that answers might never come. Still, the Harris and Thompson families refused to let the effort fade. Michael stood in the small operations tent set up by park rangers, surrounded by maps marked with colored pins and circles. "You've scoured the same section 3 times, he argued, pointing to a shaded area near the northwest shore. "Expand outward. They could have drifted, gotten caught somewhere else." A ranger, his voice steady but firm, replied, "We have limited resources. Every expansion means stretching thinner. We can't cover endless ground forever." Michael slammed his palm against the table. "They're not gone without a trace. Something happened out there and you're just not seeing it." The ranger held his gaze for a long moment before sighing. "We're not giving up, but nature doesn't always give us the closure we want." The tension between desperate families and exhausted authorities grew sharper each day. Emily's father confronted a local reporter outside the tent. "You don't know them. You don't know who my daughter is. Stop spinning your theories and start helping." His voice cracked with grief, but the cameras caught every word, broadcasting the raw anguish across Oregon. In town, speculation became a form of entertainment. At the diner near the park entrance, customers lowered their voices yet spoke freely. Some insisted the canoe must have capsized in a sudden gust of wind. Others leaned toward suspicion, whispering of foul play. A waitress poured coffee and muttered, "Strange things happen at that lake. It swallows people whole." Emily's mother couldn't bear to hear such talk. She sat in silence on the porch of their rented cabin, clutching a photo of her daughter as if it might dissolve in her hands. Her eyes stayed fixed on the tree line, as though Emily might simply walk out of the forest at any moment, smiling and apologizing for the scare. Reporters thrived on the unanswered questions. Local news ran segments filled with speculation, and national outlets soon followed. "Did the couple fall victim to the lake's infamous weather shifts?" one anchor asked. "Or was there something more sinister behind their sudden disappearance?" Each headline cut deeper into the family's wounds. Michael despised the circus it had become. He avoided interviews, his focus locked solely on finding real answers. Yet as days turned to weeks, even his resolve faltered at times. Standing at the shore one evening, he whispered to the water, "Tell me what you did with them." The lake, dark and still beneath the rising moon, remained indifferent. Small details emerged but only deepened the mystery. Divers reported unusual currents near an underwater ledge, dangerous enough to trap debris. Search dogs occasionally reacted near the shoreline, only for the trail to vanish abruptly in the volcanic soil. Each clue dangled hope before snapping it away. The community, once united, began to fracture under the weight of so many unknowns. Some volunteers drifted back to their lives, believing the search hopeless. Others clung stubbornly to the effort, unwilling to abandon the couple to silence. Michael's determination became a lifeline, not only for himself, but for everyone still holding on. "I don't care how long it takes," he told the sheriff one evening. 1 year, 10 years, whatever it takes. I'll keep pushing until we know the truth." The sheriff studied him, weary but respectful. "I hope you're right, but sometimes the truth stays buried." Those words haunted Michael long after, echoing in his mind as he looked out across the endless expanse of water. The unanswered questions loomed larger than the lake itself, casting shadows over every attempt to move forward. A decade had passed since Daniel and Emily Harris vanished without a trace. The lake that had swallowed their story remained as beautiful and menacing as ever, drawing tourists from across the country, while locals still whispered about the couple who never came back. For most, the memory had faded into a tragic legend, but for their families, the wound had never healed. Michael Harris carried it like a shadow, a constant reminder of the unanswered questions that ruled his life. Far from his grief, another life unfolded in silence. Anna Thompson, 35, adjusted the straps of her hiking backpack as she tightened her boots at a small trailhead near Crater Lake. Hiking had always been her refuge, a way to steady herself after life's blows. Recently, she had been trying to recover from a divorce that had left her feeling hollow, stripped of both certainty and trust. Nature was where she went to breathe again, where the steady rhythm of her steps helped her put fractured pieces back together. That morning, a cool breeze carried the smell of pine through the air. The sun filtered through tall Douglas firs, dappling the ground with shifting patches of gold. Anna pulled her jacket tighter as she set off, her eyes scanning the steep terrain. This wasn't one of the well-worn tourist trails, but a quieter path, one she'd chosen deliberately. She wanted solitude, not crowds with cameras. The trail grew more rugged as she climbed higher. Loose rocks crunched beneath her boots, and the silence pressed in, broken only by the calls of distant birds. Anna paused often, not just to catch her breath, but to take in the vastness around her. From one overlook, she caught a glimpse of the lake itself, impossibly blue and serene, as though it had never witnessed tragedy. Still, there was something about the place that unsettled her. Locals had told her stories at the cafe in town, about sudden storms, about people vanishing without explanation. She had nodded politely, dismissing them as folklore, but now, standing alone in the shadow of volcanic cliffs, the stories felt heavier. Hours into her hike, she reached a section where the earth looked strangely disturbed. The ground was layered with loose volcanic ash, shifted recently by a minor tremor the area had experienced weeks earlier. Anna crouched, brushing her hand across the surface. Her fingers snagged on something hard, something that did not belong to the earth around it. At first she thought it was just a piece of fallen branch buried in the ash, but as she pulled, her breath caught. The edge of worn, weathered wood appeared, a fragment curved unnaturally as though shaped by human hands. Her pulse quickened. She dug carefully, ash clinging to her gloves, until more of the object emerged. It wasn't a branch. It was a broken piece of something larger, something unmistakably crafted. A shiver ran through her as the realization formed. This was part of a canoe. She leaned back, heart pounding. Why here? Why now? The logical part of her mind urged caution. Canoes had been on this lake for over a century, but something deeper told her this was different. The ground had preserved it, hidden until the tremor revealed just enough to catch her eye. Anna sat back on her heels, staring at the exposed wood. A mixture of awe and dread washed over her. She didn't know the story yet, didn't know whose canoe it had been, but she felt the gravity of her discovery. Something buried in this ash carried the weight of the past, and she had stumbled upon it without meaning to. She rose slowly, her breath sharp in the cold air. "What are you doing here?" she whispered to the broken fragment as if it might answer. The wind stirred through the trees, carrying no reply, but Anna knew with sudden certainty that she had uncovered something that would not let her walk away unchanged. Anna's heart thudded as she knelt beside the fragment of canoe. The piece of wood was cracked, water-worn, yet unmistakably shaped by human hands. She brushed away more of the volcanic ash, and her gloves caught on something soft, something that resisted. Carefully she dug, her breath coming faster as the earth released its grip. A strip of faded fabric emerged, torn and fragile. Anna lifted it gently, holding it up to the light. The once vivid colors were dulled by time, but there was a pattern, a floral design, delicate, almost cheerful. It was the kind of fabric used for a scarf or a piece of clothing. She frowned, her chest tightening. Someone had left this behind. Her hands shook as she cleared more ash, uncovering a small object that gleamed faintly even under layers of dirt. When she pulled it free, her breath caught in her throat, a silver necklace tarnished but intact, with a small pendant shaped like a heart. Inside the pendant, though faded, was a tiny photograph of a smiling couple. Anna froze, staring. She didn't know their names, but she felt the weight of their story instantly. This wasn't just debris. This was someone's life, sealed away in the earth for years. Her mind raced. What if this belonged to someone missing? What if she had just stumbled onto something tied to the whispered stories about the lake? She remembered the locals in the cafe, mentioning the couple who had vanished years ago. A husband, a pregnant wife. Could it be them? The thought sent a chill through her bones. She closed her hand around the necklace, her knuckles whitening. The weight of it was heavier than metal. It carried grief, time, and silence. She stood, trying to steady her breathing. The forest felt suddenly oppressive, the shadows of the trees closing in. She glanced around, half expecting someone else to appear, though she was utterly alone. Her voice wavered when she spoke aloud, as though the silence needed breaking. "Who were you?" she whispered. The wind rustled through the branches but gave no answer. Only the unearthed fragments at her feet testified to lives interrupted. Anna's instinct was to keep digging, to see what else the ground concealed. But reason pulled her back. She wasn't equipped for this. What if disturbing the site destroyed important evidence? What if the story hidden here deserved careful hands? Her phone felt heavy in her pocket. She pulled it out, staring at the dark screen as doubt clouded her mind. Should she call? Would anyone believe her? People might dismiss her as a hiker chasing shadows, but deep down she knew. These objects mattered. They weren't random. Finally, she pressed the numbers, her fingers trembling. The ranger station answered on the second ring. "This is Anna Thompson," she said quickly, her voice low but urgent. I think I've found something near the ridge trail. A piece of a canoe. Some personal items. I think they could belong to people who went missing." There was a pause on the other end, then a firm voice. "Stay where you are, ma'am. Don't touch anything else." "We'll send a team right away." Anna lowered the phone slowly, her eyes still fixed on the broken wood, the fabric, the necklace in her hand. She felt a strange mixture of dread and responsibility, as if the earth had chosen her to uncover what it had hidden for so long. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. She knew her life had just shifted, even if she didn't yet understand how. The ground beneath her boots was no longer just a trail through the forest. It was the border between the present and a past that refused to stay buried. The call from Anna reached the ranger station just after noon, and within the hour, a team of uniformed officers arrived at the ridge. Their boots pressed into the soft ash as they carefully approached the site, clipboards and evidence bags in hand. Anna stood off to the side, arms wrapped tightly around herself, trying to steady her nerves as the professionals marked and photographed what she had uncovered. One of the rangers, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face, spoke calmly to her. "Ma'am, you did the right thing calling this in. We're going to secure everything here. Can you tell me exactly how you found it?" Anna nodded quickly, her throat dry. "I was hiking, just following the trail. I noticed the ground looked disturbed, loose ash like it had shifted. I started brushing it back and the wood came up first, then the fabric. And then the necklace." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, as though speaking it out loud made it heavier. The ranger wrote notes but glanced at her with something between sympathy and concern. "We'll be taking this seriously. These items may connect to a cold case we've had for years." The words settled over Anna like a weight. Cold case. That meant real people, real families, waiting. She nodded again, suddenly feeling the enormity of what she had stumbled upon. By nightfall, the discovery had reached county authorities. Detectives from the sheriff's office reopened files long stored away, blowing dust off boxes labeled Harris, Daniel, and Emily, 2010. The faded photographs of a smiling young couple were pinned once more to bulletin boards. Reports of failed searches, divers' logs, witness statements, all of it returned to the center of attention. When Michael Harris received the call, his world stopped. He had lived 10 years in a limbo of not knowing, each day carrying the ache of absence. Hearing that something, anything, had been found, made his breath catch. "What did you say?" he asked the deputy on the line, his voice trembling. The deputy repeated carefully, "Items believed to be connected to your brother and sister-in-law were discovered near the ridge trail at Crater Lake. The investigation is being reopened. We'll need you to come in." Michael sat in silence, his hand gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. For a moment he couldn't move, then the tears came, hot and sudden. "After all this time," he whispered, "finally something." The following day he arrived at the sheriff's office, his eyes bloodshot but alive with determination. The detectives showed him the necklace, sealed in an evidence bag. Michael stared at it for a long moment before his shoulders shook. "That's Emily's," he said hoarsely. "She never took it off." It was a gift from her mother. Detectives exchanged glances. This was the confirmation they needed to proceed. The story broke quickly in the media. 10 years later, "Discovery reopens case of missing couple at Crater Lake," the headlines read. Reporters crowded near the park entrance once again, microphones raised, eager for details. Some spoke of closure, others of secrets finally coming to light. For the families, though, it was not closure. It was the reopening of wounds that had never fully healed. Anna watched from a distance as her name entered the reports. Strangers now described her as the hiker who found the evidence. She felt both exposed and strangely responsible, as though she had been pulled unwillingly into the Harrises' story. That night, she lay awake replaying the moment she had brushed the ash away. The weight of the necklace in her palm haunted her, pressing on her chest like a stone. For the first time in 10 years, the silence around Daniel and Emily's disappearance cracked open. Questions that had once been buried now surged back to life, demanding answers. And though no one yet knew where this discovery would lead, every heart connected to the case felt the same unshakable truth. The past was no longer finished with them. The discovery reignited something Michael had buried deep inside him, the raw ache of losing his brother. For years he had forced himself forward, working long hours, building a life that functioned but never truly healed. Now, As he sat in his small kitchen, staring at the evidence bag containing Emily's necklace, it felt as if time had folded back on itself. His mother, grey-haired and frail, sat across the table. She reached out with trembling hands, her fingers brushing the plastic. "That's hers," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hold them back. "I bought it for her 25th birthday. She cried when I gave it to her. She said it was the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received." Michael's throat tightened. "It proves they were there. It proves they didn't just disappear into thin air." His voice wavered between anger and relief, as though naming the truth out loud cost him something. Meanwhile, Emily's parents faced their own torment. Her father, Robert, slammed his fist against the mantel of their home in Salem. 10 years, he growled. 10 years, and now they tell us this." All this time they said nothing could be found. His wife, Margaret, sat quietly in her armchair, clutching a framed photo of Emily. She spoke softly, her words laced with pain. "It means she's really gone, Robert. There's no denying it anymore." The community felt the ripple, too. In town, the same diner where whispers had once circulated now buzzed with renewed chatter. "They finally found something," one man said over his coffee. "Guess the stories were true after all." Another shook his head. "Finding scraps doesn't mean they'll ever find bodies. The lake takes what it wants." For Michael, these words stung more than he admitted. He avoided public places, unwilling to hear strangers speak of his family as if they were characters in some local folklore. But inside, his emotions churned relentlessly. At night he dreamed of Daniel's laughter, of Emily's bright smile. He woke with the sound of rushing water in his ears, as though the lake itself was taunting him. When detectives called him back to the sheriff's office, he braced himself for more. They laid out photographs of the items recovered, each labeled and catalogued. "We're reopening the full investigation," one detective explained. "We'll be conducting interviews again, revisiting old leads. This is our chance to look at everything with fresh eyes." Michael leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "I want to be involved. Don't shut me out this time. I've waited too long." The detective met his gaze. "We understand how much this means to you. But you need to let us do our job. If there's something you know, something you remember, this is the time to share it." Michael shook his head. "I've told you everything 100 times. There's nothing new in my memory. But if this necklace came back, maybe other things will too. Maybe the truth is still out there." Leaving the station, Michael felt a mix of exhaustion and fire burning in his chest. The reopening of the case had reopened his grief, but it had also reignited his determination. He couldn't ignore the pull of unfinished business. That evening he stood once more at the lake's edge. The sun dipped low, painting the water in streaks of orange and red. He clenched his fists at his sides and spoke softly into the vast silence. "I'm not done with you, not until I know what you took from me." The rippling water reflected the last light of day, offering no reply. But Michael felt it in his bones. The past was no longer buried. It was clawing its way back to the surface. Hannah had thought her part in the discovery would end with the phone call to the rangers. She assumed the authorities would take over, collect the evidence, and she could return to her quiet life of hikes and solitude. But once her name appeared in the newspapers, strangers began to look at her differently. People in town stared when she entered the grocery store, whispering as she passed. To them, she wasn't just another hiker anymore. She was the one who had awakened a mystery that had slept for 10 years. The weight of it pressed on her more heavily than she expected. Each night she lay awake, replaying the moment her fingers brushed against the broken canoe wood. It had felt like touching history, like disturbing something sacred. Now she wondered if she had done the right thing. A knock at her cabin door one evening startled her. When she opened it, Michael Harris stood there, his posture stiff, his face lined with exhaustion. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "You're Anna Thompson?" She nodded. "Yes. And you're Daniel's brother." His eyes softened briefly. "I wanted to thank you for what you found." Anna hesitated. "I don't know if thanks is the right word. I just happened to be in the wrong place, or maybe the right one. I'm not sure." Michael stepped inside when she gestured, sitting heavily in the wooden chair by the table. He rubbed his hands together, his gaze unfocused. For 10 years I've been waiting for something, anything. And then you come along and suddenly there's proof they were here. Proof they didn't just vanish into nothing. That means more than you realize. She studied him, sensing the storm beneath his calm words. But doesn't it make it worse too? I mean, finding pieces without answers. Doesn't it just reopen all the pain? He looked up sharply, eyes glassy. The pain never closed. The only thing worse than grief is not knowing. What you gave me is hope. Even if it hurts, Anna swallowed hard. She hadn't expected her discovery to intertwine her fate with theirs, but she felt the pull now. The necklace, the fabric, the canoe, those fragments had chosen her, and through them, she was now part of the Harris family's battle for truth. In the days that followed, detectives called her in for repeated interviews. She described every detail, the exact spot of the discovery, the disturbed soil, the way the objects looked before she touched them. Each time she left feeling wrung out, as though the story had drained pieces of her. At the same time, townspeople began to approach her directly. In the cafe, an elderly man leaned close and whispered, "That lake's cursed. You should have left what you found buried." A woman at the post office told her, "You're the answer to those parents' prayers. Don't doubt that." The contradictions unsettled her. She had never asked for attention, but now she couldn't escape it. Even on the trail where she once found peace, she felt the invisible weight of expectation. One afternoon, Michael met her again near the ranger station. "They're calling you the key witness," he said. Anna frowned. "Witness to what? I didn't see anything. I only dug something up." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not." She let out a shaky laugh. "That's what scares me. I don't know if I'm strong enough for it." Michael studied her quietly before answering. "Neither did I 10 years ago, but strength shows up when you have no choice." The words lingered long after he left, leaving Anna with the realization that she was no longer a bystander. The mystery had pulled her in, and she could already feel how deeply it was going to change her. The evidence collected from Anna's discovery was sent to the state crime lab in Salem, where forensic experts began a meticulous process of examination. Days stretched into weeks, and each update came like a drop of water into a parched desert. Small, but enough to keep hope alive. Michael sat in the sheriff's office when the first report came back. A detective slid a folder across the table. "The necklace and fabric are consistent with items known to belong to Emily Harris. The canoe fragment matches the make and model Daniel rented the day they vanished." Michael's hands tightened around the folder. "So it's them," he whispered. "Finally proof." The detective nodded but raised a hand. "Proof they were there, yes. But it doesn't explain how or why it ended this way. That's where things get complicated." Complicated was an understatement. Subsequent tests revealed unusual marks on the canoe fragment. One forensic specialist described them as unnatural cuts, not consistent with natural erosion. That detail unsettled everyone in the room. If the canoe had been damaged intentionally, the disappearance might not have been an accident at all. Meanwhile, park rangers studied geological records of the area. 10 years earlier, the slopes above the ridge trail had been unstable. A minor landslide had gone mostly unnoticed, overshadowed by the disappearance itself. "It's possible the canoe and personal items were buried under that slide," one ranger explained. "The recent tremor could have shifted the ash enough to expose them." Theories multiplied, each tugging the case in a different direction. Some investigators leaned toward the natural explanation, a rock slide that swallowed the couple in seconds. Others couldn't ignore the sharp markings on the canoe. Michael found himself torn between relief at new leads and fury at the ambiguity. Late one evening, he met Anna at the small diner outside the park. They sat in a booth tucked away from prying eyes, steam rising from untouched cups of coffee. "They told me about the cuts," Anna said softly, her brow furrowed. "If someone tampered with their canoe, that changes everything." Michael's jaw tightened. "I've lived with every possibility in my head for 10 years. Accident, storm, even the idea they ran away. But sabotage, that's worse than all of it. It means someone knew, someone did this. Anna studied his face, the lines carved by years of carrying grief. What if it was just the land, Michael? The ash, the rocks? Maybe no one's to blame. His eyes darkened. That's easier to believe, but those cuts, why are they there? Why now? He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'm ready for the answer, but I need it. As word of the findings spread, the media seized on the controversy. Evidence suggests Canoe may have been tampered with, one headline blared. Another speculated accident or foul play. New clues point to darker possibility. Cameras swarmed the park once again, and every mention of the case pulled more eyes, more questions, and more pressure. Emily's parents refused interviews, their grief still too raw. But Michael spoke briefly to a reporter outside the sheriff's office. His voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. I don't care what it takes. I just want the truth. My brother and Emily deserve that much. Back in her cabin, Anna scrolled through the news on her phone, her stomach in knots. She hadn't wanted to be part of a storm like this, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her role was far from over. The land had given up its first secret, but secrets rarely come alone. The trail of clues had begun, and it was leading everyone deeper into a past that refused to stay buried. The town buzzed with speculation, and every corner seemed to host a new theory about what had really happened to Daniel and Emily Harris. The reappearance of their belongings had shaken old memories loose, and the mystery once buried in silence was now dissected in diners, newsrooms, and even among the park rangers themselves. Inside the ranger station, a heated discussion unfolded. Look, the simplest answer is still the right one, Ranger Phillips insisted, arms crossed as he leaned against the map-covered wall. That slope above the ridge was unstable. A slide could have buried the canoe and anything inside it. When the tremor hit, it shifted the ash enough to uncover the remains. End of story. Detective Ramirez wasn't convinced. She tapped the report on the table. And how do you explain the cuts on the canoe? Forensics ruled out natural erosion. These marks were deliberate. Somebody tampered with it, Phillips scoffed, or the canoe was damaged in transport before they even used it. You're letting your imagination run wild. Michael, sitting in the corner, clenched his fists. No, you're not listening. Daniel was careful. He would have checked the canoe. If it was faulty, he never would have taken Emily out there. Someone did this. You can't dismiss that. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. Meanwhile, the media amplified every angle. One network ran a segment titled, Foul Play at Crater Lake. Experts debate canoe evidence. Another countered with, Nature's wrath or human hands. The Harris mystery reignites. The public devoured it, each person choosing the theory that best fit their view of the world. Anna found herself caught in the storm, her phone lighting up with calls from journalists who wanted her perspective. She ignored most of them, unwilling to be dragged further into the spotlight, but even in silence she couldn't escape the weight of what she had unearthed. Sitting at her kitchen table one night, she confided in Michael when he came by. Sometimes I wish I'd never gone hiking that day, she admitted, her voice low. I didn't just find a necklace, Michael. I found a door to something I can't close. He looked at her with tired eyes but shook his head. You didn't create this, you uncovered it. And I'm glad you did. I've lived 10 years with nothing. Now I finally have a reason to push harder. Anna sighed, staring at her hands. But what if pushing harder just tears everything apart? What if the truth isn't what you're hoping for? Michael's jaw tightened. The truth doesn't care what I hope for. I need it, no matter how much it hurts. The divide between accident and crime grew sharper. Some investigators doubled down on the geological explanation, citing past slides and unstable terrain. Others couldn't ignore the unnatural damage. Even among the Harris family, arguments arose. Emily's father clung to the idea of an accident, insisting that imagining foul play only deepened the torment. Michael, however, grew more convinced with each passing day that someone had interfered. At a press conference outside the sheriff's office, the conflict came into the open. A reporter shouted, Do authorities believe the Harrises were victims of foul play? The sheriff answered carefully, "At this stage, we are pursuing all possibilities. The evidence is inconclusive." Michael, standing among the crowd, muttered under his breath, "Inconclusive isn't good enough." The uncertainty was suffocating. For every path that pointed to nature's indifference, another hinted at human hands steering the tragedy. The case stood at a crossroads, and with it everyone tied to Daniel and Emily was forced to confront the same agonizing question. Was this a story of cruel fate or of calculated malice? For weeks, the investigation circled around the same questions, running in loops that never seemed to break. Then, one quiet afternoon, a phone call arrived at the sheriff's office that shifted everything. The caller was an older fisherman named Walter Jenkins, who had lived near Crater Lake his entire life. His voice crackled through the receiver, hesitant but steady. "I think I saw something the night before that couple disappeared. Been on my mind ever since. Maybe it's nothing, but with all this news I figured I should finally say it." Detective Ramirez leaned forward in her chair. "Go on, mister." "Jenkins, what exactly did you see?" Walter cleared his throat. "I was out late, couldn't sleep, took my boat near the southern edge of the lake. That's when I noticed another figure down near the waterline. It was dark, but I could tell he didn't belong there. He wasn't hiking or fishing, just lurking, watching." Ramirez scribbled notes quickly. "Did you recognize this person?" A pause. "Then, not clearly, but he was tall, broad-shouldered. He had this stiff way of moving, like he was pacing. I didn't think much of it back then. But the next day, when I heard that couple had gone missing, I couldn't stop wondering. What if he had something to do with it?" The detail jolted the investigation forward. A man by the lake, the night before Daniel and Emily vanished. It was the first new lead in years that pointed toward a human presence beyond the couple themselves. When Michael heard, his pulse hammered in his ears. "You see, I told you someone was there. Daniel didn't just vanish because of the lake. Someone was involved." The detectives cautioned him not to jump ahead. "A sighting is not evidence," Ramirez warned, "but it gives us a direction. We'll look into records of anyone who might match that description." Digging into old files, they found something unsettling. Among Daniel's colleagues at the Portland High School where he taught was a man named Ethan Miller. He had worked with Daniel for years before quitting suddenly. Several co-workers described Ethan as jealous of Daniel's popularity with students and admired the easy warmth of his marriage. Rumors swirled of resentment that had festered over time. One teacher's testimony stood out. "Ethan always made little comments about Emily. Not crude, but unsettling. Like he envied Daniel, like he thought she should have been his." When detectives cross-referenced Ethan's physical description with Walter's account, the similarities were striking. Broad-shouldered, tall, known to be moody, prone to unpredictable behavior. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to reopen a long-forgotten name. Michael's anger flared when he heard it. "You're telling me you never looked into this guy before? He had motives, he had access, and no one bothered to push harder?" Detective Ramirez kept her voice even. "At the time, we had no evidence linking him to the lake. Now, with this witness account, we can re-examine his history." That evening, Michael couldn't shake the image of Ethan Miller by the water, standing in the shadows while Daniel and Emily prepared for their last canoe ride. He replayed every memory he had of Ethan. The way he hung back at staff gatherings, the tight smile that never reached his eyes. Sitting in his car outside the sheriff's office, Michael clenched the steering wheel. If he had anything to do with this, I'll make sure the world knows. The case had shifted. For the first time, the questions weren't only about the lake or its dangers. A human figure had entered the story, pulling the threads of suspicion tighter. And with that breakthrough came a new, unsettling possibility. Maybe the tragedy at Crater Lake wasn't nature's doing at all. Detectives moved quickly once Ethan Miller's name surfaced again. They pulled old employment records, tracked down his last known address, and quietly began piecing together his life since leaving Portland. Ethan had drifted between jobs, teaching briefly at smaller schools before disappearing into seasonal work across Oregon. His reputation followed him, intelligent but volatile, respected by some yet distrusted by many. When investigators finally approached him, Ethan lived in a modest rental outside Eugene. He opened the door with guarded eyes, his tall frame filling the doorway. Detective Ramirez introduced herself and held out a badge. "Mr. Miller, we'd like to ask you a few questions about Daniel and Emily Harris." His expression flickered, something between annoyance and discomfort. "That was 10 years ago," he said flatly. "Why come to me now?" "We've received new information," Ramirez replied. "We need to clarify your whereabouts during the time of their disappearance." Ethan stepped aside reluctantly, gesturing them inside. The house was sparse, books stacked in uneven piles, dishes left unwashed. He sat heavily in a chair and folded his arms. "I already told the police back then. I had nothing to do with it." Ramirez kept her tone calm. "Where were you the night before they vanished?" Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Home, alone, nobody to vouch for me, but that doesn't make me guilty of anything." Michael, who had been allowed to observe from the corner, couldn't contain himself. "You hated my brother, everyone knew it. You envied his marriage, his career, you made comments about Emily. Don't act like this is all in our heads." Ethan's face flushed. He shot back sharply. "I respected Emily more than you'll ever know, but I didn't hurt them. Do you think I'd spend 10 years in silence if I had?" The room thickened with tension. Ramirez raised a hand to steady the exchange. "Mr. Miller, forensic evidence has raised new questions. The canoe Daniel and Emily used may have been tampered with. Do you have anything to say about that?" Ethan leaned forward, eyes flashing. "That's absurd. I never even saw the canoe. You're chasing ghosts." The detectives left with more questions than answers. Ethan had denied everything, but his defensiveness and inconsistencies stirred doubt. Ramirez confided to Michael afterward, "He doesn't give us proof, but he doesn't give us peace either. We'll need more." Back in town, word spread quickly that a suspect had surfaced. Reporters circled like vultures, speculating openly. Some labeled Ethan a jealous co-worker with motive. Others argued it was unfair to accuse a man with no concrete evidence. Anna read the headlines with unease. She felt torn, relieved that the investigation had a human face, yet unsettled by the lack of clarity. That evening she met Michael again at the cafe. "Do you really think he did it?" she asked quietly, stirring her untouched tea. Michael's voice was low, weighted with years of frustration. "Every bone in my body tells me he's connected. I saw the way he looked at Emily back then." It wasn't admiration, it was obsession. Anna searched his face, seeing both conviction and torment. But what if the truth is different? What if the cuts on the canoe mean something else entirely? Michael exhaled sharply, leaning back. "Then at least I'll know. But if Ethan's guilty, I won't rest until it's proven." For now, suspicion hung in the air like fog over the lake, thick, heavy, impossible to see through. The reawakened case had narrowed its focus, but certainty remained out of reach. Ethan Miller had become the name on everyone's lips, the figure casting a shadow over the Harris tragedy. Whether that shadow held guilt or merely suspicion was still painfully unclear. Anna had never imagined her life would collide so violently with the story of strangers. Yet now, each morning she woke with the Harris case pressing on her chest like an invisible weight. Her discovery had stirred more than an investigation. It had unsettled her own soul. For years she had wandered Oregon's trails to escape her past, to quiet the ache of a marriage that had ended in betrayal and silence. Hiking had been her way of reclaiming herself, but finding Emily's necklace had thrust her into something bigger than her own healing. It was as if the earth had handed her a burden she hadn't asked for yet, couldn't put down. One evening she sat by the window of her cabin, the forest outside humming with crickets. Michael arrived, his face drawn and weary. He sat opposite her, resting his hands on the table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Anna broke the silence. "I feel like I don't belong in this story," she admitted softly. "I wasn't supposed to find them. I was just trying to find myself." Michael's eyes were tired but steady. "Maybe you do belong. Maybe you were meant to find them, because no one else ever did." Anna shook her head, her chest tightening. "But what if I've made things worse? What if uncovering this only brings more pain to your family?" He leaned forward, his voice rough with emotion. You didn't bring the pain. It was already here. You gave us something real after years of nothing. Don't ever think that's a burden. His words sank into her, leaving her both comforted and unsettled. For the first time in years, she felt connected to something larger than herself, not just to the Harrises, but to the search for truth itself. Over the following days, Anna noticed the shift inside her. Instead of shrinking from the attention, she began to accept her role. When detectives asked her to walk them back to the site of her discovery, she agreed without hesitation, guiding them through the rugged trail. She answered their questions with a clarity she hadn't expected, her voice steady even when memories of that first moment returned. At night, though, doubt still crept in. She dreamed of the ash-covered ground, of Emily's necklace glinting in the soil. In the dream, she reached for it again and again, each time feeling as though she was pulling not just metal, but the weight of a life cut short. One afternoon, she found herself speaking to Margaret, Emily's mother. The older woman's hands trembled as she held Anna's. "How you've given me back a piece of my daughter," Margaret whispered. "For years I didn't even know if she had left this world in fear or in peace. Now at least I know she was here, that she mattered." Tears filled Anna's eyes. "I wish I could do more," she said. Margaret shook her head gently. "You've already done more than anyone else in a decade." The encounter left Anna changed. For so long she had viewed herself as broken, carrying only loss. But now she realized her pain had prepared her to carry someone else's too. Her loneliness had sharpened her empathy, and her own search for meaning had become entangled with the Harrises' story. That night, as the wind rustled the trees outside her cabin, Anna whispered into the dark, as though speaking to Emily herself. "I don't know why I found you, but I won't walk away now, I promise." The words surprised her with their certainty. For the first time in years, Anna felt she had a purpose. The mystery of Daniel and Emily Harris was no longer just a tragedy she had stumbled upon. It had become the turning point in her own journey, binding her to their story in a way she could no longer deny. Months of renewed investigation brought both exhaustion and clarity. Detectives sifted through every report, every interview, every fragment of evidence. Theories had risen and fallen, suspects had been questioned, but the closer they looked, the more one truth emerged. Nature itself had dealt the fatal blow. A team of geologists, called in to study the ridge near the discovery site, delivered their findings at a final meeting. Their lead, Dr. Caroline Hughes, spread diagrams across the table. "The slope above the ridge was unstable a decade ago," she explained. "Records show a minor landslide occurred shortly after the Harrises disappeared. Our analysis confirms the canoe and belongings were likely swept under by that event, buried in ash and rock until the recent tremor exposed them." Detective Ramirez folded her arms. "And the cuts on the canoe?" Dr. Hughes adjusted her glasses. "They appear unnatural, yes, but after testing we believe they resulted from impact with sharp volcanic rock as the canoe broke apart in the slide. And not sabotage, just the brutal force of terrain." Michael sat silently, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. He had wanted foul play to explain the senselessness, to put a face on the tragedy. But as the evidence laid itself bare, he felt his resistance crumble. His brother and Emily had not been betrayed by another human. They had been betrayed by the mountain itself. When the meeting ended, Michael walked outside, the crisp Oregon air cutting into his lungs. Anna followed, her footsteps soft on the gravel. "It's over," she said quietly. He turned toward her, his eyes wet. "Over? How can it ever be over? They were supposed to have a life, a child, and all this time I told myself someone had stolen it. But it was just rock and ash. Something no one could fight." Anna placed a hand on his arm. "It doesn't make the loss smaller, but maybe it means you don't have to carry hate anymore. Maybe that's the only peace you'll ever get." He nodded slowly, his chest heavy with a grief that felt both lighter and sharper at once. Emily's parents accepted the conclusion with quiet devastation. Margaret held the necklace to her chest, whispering, "At least we know." Robert, though silent, allowed his tears to fall freely for the first time in years. The mystery had broken them, but certainty, however cruel, gave them a chance to breathe again. The sheriff delivered the official statement at a press conference. After extensive investigation, we conclude that Daniel and Emily Harris died tragically as the result of a natural landslide near Crater Lake in 2010. While speculation of foul play was explored, no evidence supports intentional harm. Our hearts remain with the families. The cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and the story was sealed. For the community, the Harris disappearance shifted from unsolved enigma to heartbreaking accident. For the families, closure arrived with both mercy and pain. Later that evening, Michael and Anna stood at the lake's edge. The sun dipped low, the water glowing with streaks of fire. Michael's voice was soft, almost a prayer. "Daniel, Emily, you're part of this place now. I wish I could have saved you, but I'll carry you with me always." Anna felt the wind brush against her face, as though the lake itself exhaled. She whispered into the stillness, "Your story won't be forgotten." The ripples on the surface spread outward, disappearing into the vast expanse. The truth had finally surfaced, and though it did not heal every wound, it offered something the families had craved for a decade, an end to the silence. The news eventually quieted, cameras moved on, and the Harris story shifted from breaking headlines to the pages of memory. But for those closest to Daniel and Emily, the end of the investigation was not the end of their journey. It was the beginning of learning how to live with the truth. Michael returned to Portland carrying a bittersweet calm. For 10 years he had battled ghosts, imagining suspects, chasing theories, fighting shadows. Now, he faced a reality he could not change. One evening he sat with his mother in the living room, the soft hum of the city outside their window. "They're gone," he said quietly, his voice steady though his eyes shone. "But at least I know. I can stop searching the lake every time I close my eyes." His mother reached for his hand, her grip fragile but firm. "Your brother would be proud of you. You carried him all this way, you never let him go." Emily's parents mourned with a gentler grief than before. Margaret wore her daughter's necklace each day, not as a symbol of loss but of remembrance. "She lives here," she said, pressing the pendant to her chest. "She always will." And Anna, the woman who had stumbled upon the truth, found her own life transformed. Hiking was no longer just an escape from pain, it had become a path toward purpose. She had uncovered a story that mattered, and in doing so had found a reason to trust herself again. Sitting with Michael one evening by the lake, she spoke softly. "I thought I was lost when I came here, but maybe I was being led, not just to them, but to myself." Michael looked at her, the faintest hint of a smile breaking through the weight of his grief. "Then maybe they gave us more than we realized. Even in death they changed lives." The community too carried the legacy. Crater Lake remained as breathtaking as ever, but now it stood as a reminder of both beauty and fragility. Visitors learned of Daniel and Emily through quiet memorial plaques, through the whispered stories of rangers who had once searched tirelessly for them. Their tragedy became a lesson about respect for nature's power, about the unpredictability of life, and about the love that outlives even the harshest of endings. Years later, on the anniversary of the discovery, Michael and Anna hiked together along the ridge. They stood at the place where the earth had once hidden the canoe, where ash had preserved fragments of 2 lives. Michael placed a small bouquet of wildflowers into the soil, his voice low and reverent. "You're not forgotten," he whispered. "Not now, not ever." Anna closed her eyes, letting the wind brush against her face, carrying the memory of Daniel and Emily into the vast expanse of sky. She thought of all the lives they had touched, students who still remembered Daniel's stories, patients who had felt Emily's kindness, families who had followed their disappearance with aching hearts. Their legacy lived on, not in how they died, but in how they had loved and been loved. For viewers, this story reminds us of something deeper. Mysteries are not always about villains or crimes. Sometimes they are about resilience, about the courage to search for answers, and about the strength to carry on when those answers hurt. If this journey has moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We bring you stories of mystery, humanity, and truth, stories that linger long after the last word. And if you want to continue exploring, click the suggested video now and join us in uncovering another tale that waits to be told. The lake kept its silence, but the story of Daniel and Emily Harris would echo far beyond its shores, etched in memory, carried in love, and passed down as a reminder that even in tragedy, life leaves a legacy worth telling.